All right, getting ready to record the Stew Pot episode 9 with Derek Stone. And countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, Derek, can you hear me?
I can't hear you, bud. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, now I can hear you. I heard a beeping car.
Yeah, I'm in my truck. You know what? Sometimes I have trouble with the Wi-Fi at my parents' house. So if I'm doing a Skype meeting, I go to an empty parking lot. For some reason, that works a lot better. So that's where I was headed to. Maybe that would help a little bit. So if you give me about 2 minutes, I'll be right there. So how's everything going, man?
Good. You know, I'm done. I'm retired in the business, but I keep working. And I work for an insurance company, and I married with 2 daughters. One's going to be 5 in September. One will be 3 next month. We share.
I love your kids, man.
Thanks.
I love it. It's great. You know, it's funny because at first glance, they look so much like your wife, but then the more I see them, I definitely see you in there, in both of them, you know?
Yeah. Well, I say the first one definitely looks a lot like her mother. She's just like, like, oh my God, they're like twins. I mean, the hair, everything.
And it's then the hair, sure. Definitely the hair.
Oh yeah. And then the second one looks more like me, I think. And she was born on my birthday. I don't know if you knew that.
Awesome, man. I didn't know that. That's great. Very cool.
Well, we planned it because Christine was, I'm trying to get, I don't want to, well, I'm going to say her age. I don't think she cares. She was at that borderline age. She was 35. About to turn 36. And once she got to so many weeks, they said we can induce labor, and it turned out to be that was June 18th. And I looked at her and I said, I don't mind sharing a birthday. So
yeah.
We planned this. They induced her the night of the 18th, and at 9 o'clock in the morning of the June 19th, which is my birthday, my daughter was born. Yeah, it was about 8 and 9 hours of labor.
How cool.
Well, it turned out we did the right thing because she was borderline and they almost didn't want to do it, and because they were afraid they were going to induce her into a C-section. And I explained this to her. I said, 22 months ago, you gave birth to a 9-pound, 9-ounce baby, vaginally. You're not going to need a C-section. Trust me. You did it once, and she did it. I mean, she did the epidural. I told her, I said, take whatever you need. Do whatever you need to do. They do the epidural. It's like not having an epidural is like going to the dentist without Novocaine. It's ridiculous. Right. So, and there's nothing. Yeah. So honest to God, and I told Jimmy this story was because the reason why it was a good decision was because when she went on one side, I think it was her right side, the baby's heart rate started dropping. So when they put her on her left side, the heart rate went back up. They said the cords around her neck.
Oh, wow.
So they did a vacuum assisted birth, and they said, who knows what would have happened if we would have waited until the water broke, she went into labor, because the water, as soon as she sat on that core ball, they sat her on in a gown, they sat her on those balls, those big, huge balls that you sit on to work your core. They sat her on that. The water broke within a second. Wow. So I was like, she was ready to give birth any day.
Yeah. She's going anyway. Yeah.
Cool. So, because the second one's a lot easier than the first one. But
sure.
They put her on the Pitocin, they did all that. And it turns out that was the smart thing to do, because, when she was first born, she didn't cry. She didn't say anything. I was just going, uh-oh, what's going on? It took about 4 or 5 seconds, but it felt a lot longer. And I'm thinking,
sure.
like, oh my God, what's going on? And then she started crying. I'm like, oh, good deal. I was just saying, thank God. So yeah, that was that one, because you think this is my birthday, we planned this to be a happy day, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa. So you can't imagine. But it lasted only about 4 or 5 seconds until she cried, because they got her over somewhere and they did whatever they had to, because the cord wasn't in her neck, and they did it. But she's fine. I mean, she's great. She's smart. She's very vibrant. She's funny. So.
Very cool.
So what have you been up to? What's going on?
So I'm back out here in Colorado now. So I'm actually staying with my parents and kind of taking care of them a little bit. They're taking care of me a little bit too. So I just moved out back here back in January. So I've been
Cool.
out here. And I was in Leavenworth, Kansas before that, Kansas City before that, Rapid City before that. So I've kind of been around these last 10 years or so, kind of moving around a little bit.
Yeah, we know you're originally from Denver, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you're originally from Denver because we met in 1993. You were at Charlie's for about 3 months, and I started in it. You started at Charlie's in January
In
'93.
January, yeah, you started in April, right? So yeah, like pretty much the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, we were only a few months apart, but we were able to go out there and work, and then Kenny was around the same time you were, wasn't
You know,
he?
it's funny. Kenny and I started on the exact same day.
Okay.
I had actually, since I moved there, I had actually went to the gym like on a Tuesday or Monday night whenever they were training. And I really didn't train that day. I just sort of met Irene, and Charlie was at work at the prison. So I didn't actually meet him until that following Saturday. But Kenny and I started on the exact same day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's one thing I always told people stories about training with Charlie was, you heard all these horror stories about wrestling schools, like, they bring in guys and they beat them up and then they
Yeah.
make them, or they test you to see how tough you are, see if you can make it or not. Charlie didn't do that. He just had a ring. He had a ring that was as hard as concrete. And if you quit because of the ring, then you weren't going to make it. That's how he did it. I think that's how he really.
I tell people the same thing because, you always hear those horror stories about guys getting beat down and stuff. And I always tell people that I thought Charlie was a great teacher because, he never tried to get over on anybody. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He was just solely about teaching you, training you. This is right. And if it wasn't right, it wasn't right. He didn't have a personal stake in it. It was just, that wasn't good. Do it again. Do it again. I mean, I can remember one time on like a Tuesday night or whatever night we were training, and I was trying to learn how to drop elbows, and I just couldn't do it. And I must have dropped 1,000 really bad elbows, and he never got upset. He never, nothing. It was just, nope, try this, do this, do this. And then finally I got it. But yeah. It was, that ring, I always tell people professional wrestling is hard enough as it is. To be good at it, to really do it the way you're supposed to be doing it is tough enough to, you don't need anybody breaking your balls or any of that stuff. That really isn't necessary. You're either gonna do it or you're gonna quit. And how many guys did we see that would come in for a couple weeks and then be gone, or come in once every 3 months or something like that, and then they just never got. I mean, it happens all the time. So those guys weed themselves out.
Yeah, they do. They do. I've seen guys come and go. That's why I always felt, and this isn't a knock on you or a knock on Billy or anybody else that was there, or even Rod. It took me about a year of keep coming regularly and to kind of earn the respect of everybody, because they seen guys come and go, and that's
Absolutely.
all it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't.
I have felt the same thing, and I was telling some young guys that I was training the exact same thing. Look, man, there's plenty of guys that are around there that see people constantly that come in and they go, and you got to put in your time before somebody says, oh, this guy's the real deal, or this guy's going to stick around. You got it. You just have to do it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, because I remember you had a lot of choices of different schools. What made you choose Charlie's?
Okay, well, this is kind of we got some time, right? I can tell you kind of the whole process.
We'll take it as long as it takes, and you can swear if you want to. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Perfect, man. So this is I really started seriously looking at wrestling school like back in maybe 1992, the end of 1991. The only reason I went to college was because I was playing football, and even that I'd kind of gotten tired of it, and I just really wasn't there. So the only thing I wanted to do was be a pro wrestler, and back in, how it is back in those days, there wasn't a wrestling school on every corner. It was not an easy business to get into. You couldn't really find a lot of places. Me coming from Colorado, there was nothing out here. And at the time I was going to school in Ottawa, Kansas, which is a town of about 10,000 people. So there really was, it was foreign to me. So my dad and I started looking in the back of like bodybuilding magazines like Muscle Mag and Muscle Development. They would sometimes have advertisements for wrestling schools. You want to be a pro wrestler or whatever. So I wrote all of those places and got some returns back. Some of them you could tell right away, even as an 18-year-old kid, I knew were scams, and then others were like, just kind of shady. I ended up getting I got to be honest, I'm not exactly sure where I found Charlie. Oh, I think I know exactly now. I just remembered. I had called Larry Sharp in New Jersey at the other the Monster Factory, which Charlie used to train guys there for him. And he had given me, he said, you know, for whatever reason, he wasn't training guys anymore, or at that time he wasn't. So he gave me Charlie's number, which I found out later was surprising to Charlie and Irene, because I guess at the time there was a little bit of heat there. I don't know. I never really knew why or what it was, but Larry still gave me the number to call. I called Charlie. He was certainly, you know, a gentleman, and he was very informative. And I had only sort of knew Charlie. I didn't know him as well as I'd known some of the other names that I had went out to. Some of the other schools that I looked at were Brad Riggins' school in Minnesota. Okay. Yeah. And Brad was also very, very helpful. Really, really nice man. I think I would have done just fine had I went there. And I'll tell you in a minute why I didn't go there. And then I was at, this is kind of a long part of this story, but it fits. It all fits. I was in the college radio station, and that's where I met my then wife. And a buddy of mine was a huge wrestling fan, and he was like, "Hey, you know, WCW is coming to do a bunch of stuff in Kansas City and Topeka and all that. I'm gonna just send him a thing and say, hey, can I get some promo stuff, you know?" And so he just sent him a letter. Back in the day, he couldn't really send emails and stuff like that, you know, so he sent a letter. And about 2 weeks before their show, or their little loop around Kansas and Missouri, they sent this big box full of like Lex Luger and Sting t-shirts, and there was like one Four Horsemen t-shirt, a bunch of Sting bandanas, and like 60 tickets to all the events that they had around the area. I mean, just so many. I mean, it was unreal how many tickets we had. Because I mean, I assume they saw, you know, oh, Ottawa University, it's a you know, a big school, or this or that. The school had like, it was a small private school, 600 students, you know, in a town of 10,000. So my buddy Sean and I, who's still a good buddy of mine to this day, we went to a house show at Memorial Hall, just him and I, where we actually ended up sitting next to Bob Geigel. If you're familiar with the Midwest scene, Bob Geigel, a legend around that part of the country, you know, NWA promoter and great dude. So talked with, you know, I was hanging out with him. My brother was going to law school in Topeka at the time, and Topeka they did a Clash of Champions. Remember, they used to do those Clash of Champions like on TBS on Wednesday nights, you know? So we went to that. Coincidentally, that's where my actual wrestling, a debut of me on a wrestling television show was. I had a broken arm at the time, and they did a crowd shot, and you can see my purple cast being held up. So that I count that as my wrestling, my television debut is my cast. You can see above the crowd there. Anyway, so we went to the Clash of Champions. That was fun. That was the one. The big main event was Cactus Jack versus Van Hammer in a street fight. So it's kind of cool to, like, we taped it, but the version that we got to see live, they did so much more stuff. So it was kind of cool that, you know, behind the scenes, we got to see that. Then fast forward to that following Saturday night, we just blew out all the rest of the tickets, and me and my buddies were in one place, and I gave a bunch of tickets to my brother and his friends. And my brother at the time, always his whole life, was a huge Rick Rude fan, right? And this was the time that Rick Rude had his feud with Ricky Steamboat in WCW, right? So my brother, who was also a big Ricky Steamboat fan, was like yelling at Ricky Steamboat. They had really good seats, yelling at Steamboat, and like, "Steamboat, you're a big pussy. Rude's gonna kill you." You know, and he's like, through the whole match, he was just having a good time, and they were drunk and whatever. And so finally, this blonde woman looks back. She's like two rows ahead of my brother, and she says, "Why do you hate my husband so much?" My friends start cracking up and laughing, and he goes, "Oh my God, this is so great." He's like, "I love your husband. I'm just a huge Rick Rude fan." And she was really, really cool, Bonnie. She was super nice to him, and she goes, "Oh, I get it. You guys are having a good time. It's great that you're here." And he said, "Hey, my little brother wants to be a pro wrestler, and he's really having a hard time trying to find out where to go in the business. So can he talk to you? Can you help him?" And so she's like, "Well, sure, yeah." So she brought me, he brought me over. He went and found me, and I'm talking to her, and she says, "Well, I don't really know, but Ricky is usually home during the week before they go and tape or whatever. And he'll be home. I'm going to give you the number to our gym, our Gold's Gym in Charlotte, the gym that he had there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he still has it or not, but he did at the time.
Okay.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
she's like, just give him a call. She says, I know that Ivan Koloff has a gym in the neighborhood, or, pretty close to where we're at, but I don't really know anywhere. But Ricky will definitely know. So give him a call. And I'm like, holy shit, you want me to call Ricky Steamboat on Monday afternoon, right? So I called. Sure enough, Ricky Steamboat answers the phone. And I said, hey, I met your wife at the tapings, and she said that you might have some information about a wrestling school. Could have been a nicer guy, just absolutely super, super nice guy. And he said, yeah, I don't train anybody, but Ivan Koloff does. Here's his number. Tell him that you got it from me, because a lot of those guys at the time were still pretty secretive about who they would train, or even if you could get a hold of them, right?
Yeah.
That was definitely a difference now. Everybody in the world wants you to know that they're a pro wrestler, right? And back in the day, nobody did. They kind of, still kayfabed a lot of stuff, Yeah. So I called Ivan, and I kind of had it nailed down to 3 different places. Charlie's, Ivan's, and Brad Riggins' place. I really wanted to start training. Charlie was super helpful as far as he sent me every couple of days, he'd send me a new newspaper from Marion, Ohio, which is where his school was located, that had like job listings and, places to live and all of that stuff. So really very, very helpful as far as the.
Okay. This was way before the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's funny because you think about that. Nowadays it'd just be like, oh, just go online and whatever. But I mean, him and his wife Irene actually took the time to send me, because I told, look, I'm serious. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do this. And so he was very, very helpful. The deciding factor kind of came down because one, I kind of was, Charlie was just very, very helpful. And I thought it was kind of made the decision, but also Ivan and Brad were both actively still doing some touring in Japan. So I couldn't start with Brad Riggins until like June of the following year. So like June of 1993. And I really wanted to start early. The only reason I was still in school is because I was waiting for my girlfriend at the time, Gracia, to graduate. And as soon as she graduated, we were gone, So, and then the same thing with Ivan. They were all comparable with price, and it just sort of happened. And it turned out, and here's the other thing about Charlie, and I mention this to everybody, and you know this, there are very few people in the world of wrestling that nobody has a bad thing to say about.
Right.
I mean, and Charlie is one of those guys.
Yes.
He absolutely is. Because I had asked every one of them. I asked Brad Riggins. I asked Ivan. I asked Ricky Steamboat. I asked Norman the Lunatic, Mike Shaw. Every single one of them said, well, if you go there, you're going to train too, that you're not going to get ripped off, and you're not going to, So to me, even as a young guy, that spoke volumes about Charlie, that here are, 4 or 5 people that are considered his competitors, right? That looking for students or this or that. And not one of them trashed him. Not one of them said a bad thing. Every single one of them said, oh yeah, that guy can teach you how to work for sure. You'll be real good when you leave there. So that kind of helped. And then as soon as the holidays were over, Gracia and I packed up our car and I drove to Marion. That was it. So that's how I started. So kind of a long answer about how I got into the wrestling business, but that was it.
No, because it's funny, because that's probably one of the biggest questions I get now. And they found out you used to wrestle, or you're a wrestler. How did you get into that? And I said, well, it was back in '93, and I got the number from Ron Cumberledge because I saw him at a gym, and he said, yeah, tell Charlie. Because I said, how'd you get into this as a fan? I was an amateur boxer for a while, and then I didn't want to do that anymore. So then I got in. So as I saw Ron, and guess that's how Kenny got in, was through Ron too, and. And just Charlie, I called, and when they answered the phone, it said it wasn't like wrestling school. I called a different number. I think I called I can't remember what. I think it was actually the number for the gym, because it was in the back of a gym, a Future Body gym. So I remember that. And the thing is there was a lot of different places I could have gone to, couple places closer in the Cleveland area, but I made a few phone calls to Great Lakes Wrestling Promotion, another promoter in Columbus, another one in Cincinnati. I think it was Les Thatcher in Cincinnati area. And I called about, and they all had glowing things to say about Charlie. They didn't know about the other schools. So
Right.
they said stick with Charlie. So that's what I did. Plus, he worked. He knew he always like he had guys wrestling on TV for the WWF, and that to me said that spoke volumes because I mean to be on national TV like that was just to me that was an opportunity. So
Absolutely. Yeah. That's you know, so it's funny that we kind of have that same experience and we kind of get the same sort of
yeah,
result. I couldn't imagine, even though, you know, I've gone on to do some work with like Skandar Akbar and Harley Race. I can't imagine not having that experience with Charlie. Like, I just feel like my base and my foundation was so much better than so many people just right out of the gate. And I didn't really know how good I had it until I went to other areas. And I thought, you know, I'd see guys that had been wrestling for 4 or 5 years and they weren't as good as you and I were at 6 months.
yeah, that's true. And you know what? I think when I was younger, it got to my head a little bit because
Yeah.
I knew I was better than guys in the locker room. I knew I was because it's just I knew it because I did a lot in the Pittsburgh area and at the Philadelphia and ECW and stuff. And there were guys that were working on those shows that they couldn't do crap. They couldn't do anything. I was like, how are they working? You know, it was just I just throw my hands up. I'm like, yeah. The interesting thing too, because you went out, you did your stuff with Harley Race. I remember you got an opportunity with Mike Samples for a while too in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about that, man.
Yeah, that was really fun. You know, it was just kind of in the area of when I was just starting to learn how to book myself. You know what I mean? A lot of the times it was like, you know, guys from the wrestling school would get you on a show or something like that. And I'd reached out to Mike. And they were running at a really cool old building. I'm a big mark for old armories and old boxing arenas, you know, where they have just the one light hanging from the ceiling. And, you know, I loved that stuff and I still love it, you know? So I got a hold of Mike and his business partner and ended up going out there. And I was out there every Friday night for a good couple of months, you know, and it was really nice to work with a guy like Mike Samples. And there was another guy, I'm gonna blank on his name, the barroom brawler, Doug somebody. I'm sorry that I'm forgetting his name. He was a pro that had been around for a long, long time. So it was a guy that was really kind of made his living as a journeyman wrestler. And I was in a program with him. That really helped me out a ton to be with a guy who wasn't just a spot show guy who was going to try to get all his shit in one match. You know, it was like, look, we're going to be working with each other for 2 or 3 months. So here's how you do that, you know? And I learned a ton out there. I really did. It was really, really helpful.
You don't have to do every move you know in 5 minutes.
Exactly.
You don't.
You know? I always thought that was really funny that people would say like, well, what's your move set? And I'm like, what are you I know move. I know everything. I know moves. You know what I mean? I know how to do stuff. We're going to do whatever the situation calls for. Right. I mean, I get that I have to do, if I have a certain finish, I got to do that, or we got to try to work that in. I get that, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I can do a lot of stuff. You know, I always thought that was funny that guys would limit themselves to their 5 things, you know, it's crazy.
Well, there are some guys that like, they had certain spots they like to do. They had certain, certain heat things, certain this. I remember because the thing you got to be open to, I remember this with Charlie, because he'll watch you and he'll tell you exactly what he saw. You have to be open to constructive criticism.
Absolutely.
And one time I was watching tapes, so it was after, I think it might have been PWX in Pittsburgh. Norm, the guy that ran Steel City, was watching the tape with me, working as a heel. He said that's the 3rd match in a row where you got the babyface had to come back on you by missing something. Because you missed something, the babyface had to come back on you. You got to change that up a little bit. That's what he said to me. And I was just like, I didn't even realize I was doing it until he pointed it out to me. I was like, you know what, you're right. We'll change it up. So,
it's so funny that when you're not around, around here, a lot of the guys that I talk with, we have the 2-year vet syndrome, where there's guys that have been around and they know just enough to know a little bit to be dangerous, to be, you know, but it's like they're still making the same mistakes. They still, you know, are not really getting it, not really putting together a wide variety of things that they can do, and every match is in some ways exactly the same. So it's one of those things you don't really notice until you've been around a little bit, you know, because you're. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how it was for you. It was for me where I finally felt like I had been around and been to a couple of shows every here and there where I found a few things that worked. And I certainly in that process found a lot of things that did not work, you know? So I really tried to just concentrate on the one or two things that I know was probably going to get over no matter where I was. So I can totally understand that, but I also see how I've known guys that have, you know, made their whole quote career doing pretty much the same match. You know, it's like, man, I've seen that guy once. I never have to see him again because it's going to be the
Right.
same thing, you know?
Yeah. That was probably one of the criticisms of Ric Flair was he's the same match over and over again.
Right. Right. You know, I've heard some differing opinions on that though. And I certainly get that because, it was but I can also see it from Ric Flair's point of view, having been to it on a much smaller scale of myself. Like, well, I know this works. I know I can do this with this guy, even if this guy sucks. So I'm going to try this because I don't know if this guy, if I try to do something, you know, you don't get lucky enough to work with Ricky Steamboat every night. Sometimes you got to work with, you know, the Rochester Roadblock or what, you know what I mean? Like that happens. So I get it, you know, especially a guy like him, you know?
Oh yeah. You get in there and it's always funny because the thing that I noticed too is like as time went on, the business evolved because we were taught to call it in the ring.
Yeah.
We were trained to call matches in the ring. Now you try to do that, they're lost. They can't do it. Most of these young guys that I've run into, it's like, what? Call it? So I did this to somebody just to see what reaction I would get. You know, they went through everything in the locker room. They wanted to make sure they have all their cool stuff. And I said, sure, no problem. And I get to the ring and I tell the referee, I said, tell him I forgot everything. That's what I told him, just to see the look on his face. He just looked lost. So then we locked up and we just kind of went to it. We just started working. Yeah. just last week, I was talking out here to Ronnie Nicole, and we were at a gym in North Carolina when I was living down there. And I got to work out with Chili Willie. He was the ECW guy.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, we never met. Okay, we never met. We went in there. There's Dan Wright's trainees. It's a Bone Crushers Wrestling School. It's in Clayton, North Carolina. It's in a barn. Bring in a barn. We got there. Him and I met. Nice to meet you. I put my boots up, put my knee pads on, whatever. Not in that order, but I put knee pads on first. Got in. We locked up and we had a match.
Right.
First time we met, we walked up and we had a match, and their jaws dropped. They couldn't believe they were watching what they were watching. It was a good quality match, and it was about a 7-minute match. And I said, yeah. And I said, that's the foundation that we both learned. You know, he learned it from somewhere else. I learned it from Charlie. That's how it works. Guys today, they couldn't do that. And especially if you have a show, like if you wrestle once a month and you get to practice your whole match all month, that's not working.
No, not at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's easy enough.
That I always try to do, and I run into it now. And that's why, honestly, the only place that I'm really working at right now is WLW, which was Harley's organization, still run by Harley's son Leland. That attitude there is still pretty prevalent, you know, just and I can remember talking to some folks and talking to some of the young guys, and they're like, well, hey, you know, what do you want to do? You know, and I said, well, I don't know. I don't really know what the people are biting on yet. So I don't really know what we're going to do. So why don't we watch, you know, we weren't going to be on until like the fifth match. I did tell him the finish because that's what they told me what he wants for the finish. But I said, well, why don't he see what they're biting on and what other people are doing, and then we'll do something else. And to their credit, to the guys that train there, that's how they're trained too. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. That sounds good. You know, and not to be so married to one or two things that are going to get them over. You know, they're just going to just kind of feel it out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, because you work in different variety of crowds, different variety of types of people, different types of crowds. Because I'll tell you what, the Carolina crowd worked for more of my style. But when I went down and I did a couple spot shows in Texas, the guys I was working with down there, it's kind of like lucha libre, go style.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. It's like I took more bumps, and I was just taking a bunch of bumps. I was okay doing it. I was like, fine. I was like, okay. You got, if you're not used to doing that versus the Carolina style that I was used to doing, or even the Midwest style.
Right, right.
They're doing. I noticed the other thing too. A lot of the guys out east, like in New Jersey, they were very light. They didn't like to be touched. It was
Yeah,
weird.
yeah.
It was weird. This is other like Texas, man. It was lay it in. That's just the way they did it. So
Yeah.
That's how they did it.
When I left Charlie's and Gracia and I then moved to Dallas and did some stuff for Global and all of that down there, that was the first thing I noticed is that, oh yeah, everybody down here likes to fight. Everybody here is a little heavier, they put a little more into what they're doing. And it was okay, but it was definitely an adjustment. It was like, oh, okay.
Yes.
That's how we do it down here. And it's funny, as soon as I kind of realized that, and then it was like, just pay attention to where you're at. I would tell some of my students up here when I was training for Harley, like, there's a big difference to working a Kansas Fair show than working some show that you're working a small TV for every month. You know what I mean? There really are different crowds. You go to some of these small fair shows, and people who aren't normally going to wrestling shows, they see a body slam, and it's the most devastating thing they've seen in their life. They react to it like the first time they've ever seen it. So like, use that. You make, they're telling you what they want to see. You just have to listen.
Right.
They wanted to ask you, did you ever have I can remember, I remember my first maybe 2 years, if I had a match that I thought was a bigger match, I was so nervous and I threw up before matches, and I was like, I felt like I was moving a mile a minute, just boom, 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 and everything. Like, even if it was a 20-minute match, it felt like it was done in like 30 seconds, And then one day, everything just really slowed down. And then from that point, I don't know, maybe I was 2 years in or something like that. Everything was just like, now I feel like I'm moving in slow motion. I see things in crowds that I never saw before. It just like, I always felt like I had a good grasp of everything, even from the first day that I started. But then like one day, everything really, really, really clicked. And it was like, oh man, I see everything completely different now. Did you have a feeling like that as well?
Yeah. I would say it happened when I started wrestling more often and regularly.
Yeah.
And it happened in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I had that. I tell you what, one of the big ones, the big moment where it clicked, because when things started moving slower for me when I was out there, I would say, because believe it or not, I got a really good review from Dominic DeNucci, because I wrestled one of his students, and he happened to be at the show because Shane Douglas was on the show in Pittsburgh, and Dominic came over to him and said, "Hey, the guy knows what he's doing, huh?" And he's in his Italian accent. He goes, "Yeah, he was trained by Charlie Fulton." He said, "Oh, okay." And he walked away like he knew. It was like he just knew. So, and I guess Scott Summers trained at Dominic's for a little while too before he went to Charlie's. And so that was the one, because it was like that match just felt right. It just kind of clicked. It was like, okay, I got it. I got the crowd. I got everything in mind. I got everything going. Then about 2 or 3 years after that, I wrestled Tito Santana 2 nights in a row on a weekend out in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We did like a weekend loop. I got to work Tito, and it was just like such a big learning experience for him, because he sat me down and he talked to me about the ring psychology and how he puts his matches together. And he likes to go backwards. He likes to know what the finish is, and then he'll go backwards to make it make sense. And it just was like, wow. It's just that was the light bulb moment for me. Yeah. So it took about 4 or 5 years in the business for that to really click for me. But I was working regular. I was working every weekend when I was doing that too. It wasn't like I was 4 or 5 nights a week. Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was it's funny what you say that about Tito, about a lot of the guys that, and I started doing that because it felt right. Is like, let's start at the finish. Okay, we know this is our finish. How are we going to get there? Mm-hmm. And that feels right to me. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, I always talk to people like, we've got to get rid of everything. What do we need? We need to have heat, and we need to have a good finish. That's it, right? So we can figure out all the other shit. So
yeah. Well, the point somebody made to me was WrestleMania 3. Everybody remembers the finish between Hogan and Andre.
Right.
Andre got slammed, Hogan dropped the leg. That was it. Really, basically a lot of the stuff in between was a lot of heat on Hogan,
Right.
and it was Gaga. A lot of it was Gaga because they couldn't do much with Andre because his back was so bad. I mean,
Right.
that's what was happening, and Andre put him over. Another thing too, I saw this. I don't know. I like comparing a lot how a movie storyline goes compared to how a wrestling show storyline can go.
Yeah.
And in Rocky, the very first Rocky, because it was on such a shoestring budget, they shot the fight sequence backwards. They shot the finish first, and they
Right.
removed makeup as they went with Stallone and Carl Weathers. That's how they shot it. They did it backwards.
Huh.
So that's why it went so well.
Right.
What's that?
Get rid of anything that didn't matter if they had to. Right.
Yeah. They made it make sense. They made it look good. So it was really, it's just amazing how because if that movie was, I mean, he basically had like $200 in the bank or something like that when he put that together. Yeah. He was broke. Yeah, he talks about it all the time. And he I don't want to go off on what Stallone, whole thing about Stallone, but he said, I have the poverty thing figured out. I don't have it, but he didn't want to give up him being the character that he wrote. He didn't want to give that up, so he fought for it. So it was interesting, and
For sure.
But that's true because a lot of times if you get the finish, you know what makes sense to get to it. So
right.
That's because if like you were even telling me things like my first couple of months there. You know what? We kind of touched on this a little bit. Let's switch a little bit. Talk about your first WWF TV match from Charlie, because Charlie got us on TV, which was pretty cool. That was the coolest thing I thought we'd ever be a part of. That if somebody would have told me, because I was 13 months into business, and I'm wrestling on TV.
Right.
So you got there a little bit before me, because you were there a little bit longer. Talk about your first match and your first experience there.
Well, it was crazy, and this is a story I actually like to tell because it's kind of funny. I mean, now these days, I mean, I'm bigger than I was when I first started. I've been doing powerlifting and strongman stuff, but I mean, I was never a small guy. I mean, I was probably 225 when I first started, right, wrestling. So, Charlie got us on, and I was real nervous, but I was going there with like Billy and Scott Summers and some other guys that I was very, very comfortable with, and I knew they weren't gonna. They were going to help me out if I had any questions. And it was just like, just be nice to everybody and don't mark out, don't freak out. Because, and it's funny because I almost did. I didn't for like, Savage or any of those guys. But as a young kid growing up in Denver, the AWA was huge, right? So the biggest guy in the AWA for so many years was Sergeant Slaughter. And I see Sergeant Slaughter and I'm like, man, that's awesome. So I held my tongue. I didn't mark out, but I kind of wanted to anyway, so, but anyway, it was kind of funny because I was always, I was kind of insecure at the time about, man, I don't, you know how it was in the early 90s. Everybody was a giant, guys were huge. Even guys that weren't big were big guys, if Bret Hart today would be one of the bigger guys in the locker room, right? I mean, he just would, So I'm walking in, and here I am. I'm, 6'1", 225. The first guy I run into is Crush, okay, who I ended up wrestling later that night. So, and I as we're walking into the locker room, I bump into him, right? 6'7", 350 some pounds, right? And then the next guy right after him, we're walking through this little hallway. The Undertaker, right? 6'10", 330 pounds, whatever, right? And then right after him, I'm not. This is so funny. I walk in, there's the Giant Gonzalez, and he's standing right next to me. He's 7'7", 450 pounds. And then I look over, and there's, Sergeant Slaughter, who's a very, very big man, giant chin, but also has an aura that's larger than life. And I just look at Billy Kobolewski, Bodacious, and I look at him and I go, man, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I just felt like I was about this big. I was just this tiny little kid in this world of giants, so that was my very first impression, and but the match was with Crush, and this was back when he was doing the Polynesian, the Kona Crush, the Hawaiian thing, and he was would do the head crush thing. And I the match itself was probably 4 minutes, normal, job match. But it felt like it was about 10 seconds long. I mean, I felt like went out the curtain. I was in the ring. Here he comes. Boom, 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 boom. Clothesline on the floor, throws me in, Kona crush. That's it. I mean, it felt like it was that fast, And I was nervous about it, but it went pretty well. And I have to say, I ended up working with Crush probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years later on another job match when he was in the Nation of Domination. And I had seen him subsequently from the first match, and I had told him, and I probably shouldn't have told him. I said, this is my first match. And he was really cool, and he's, it will be fine. But I remember after I said that, I remember Charlie saying, if anybody asks, tell him you've been working for a year. and at that point, I'd only been working for 4 months or something like that. But 4 or 5, I can't remember. I think it was in April or May, something like that. But he was really cool and a real nice guy about it. And I was also just, it's sort of, I always tell a lot of my students, and I have been lucky enough in the last couple of years that I've been in that position to send people to do enhancement talent for the WWF that come through Kansas City or they come through, that area. I can send guys there. And I always tell guys, look, it's not something that you're going to be able to make your career at now, but when you go there, you really see how things are done. You really see what it's like to have this be your life. You really see how even the guy you don't think looks great on TV, he looks better than you do. He looks a lot better than you do. This is his full-time life, so it has always been a way for, I think, people to really see, oh, wow, this is not a joke. This isn't the guy at the Armory who, works out 3 days a week at Planet Fitness. You know what I mean? This is the real deal. So I think it all is perspective,
Yeah.
I've never liked being a guy that worked out at a gym where I was the strongest guy in the gym. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. I've never liked being in an area where I was maybe the best guy around. I always wanted to have other guys that were really talented, and other people that I could really,
Right.
play off of, because other than, if not, then why do it? Why it's boring to me,
If you're just like the big fish in the small pond type of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always liked, and I think one of the things about our training particularly is that I always felt like, look, if I had to go and do an ECW quote style match, and just, or when I was in Texas and I was working lucha where it was just spot, I could do all that stuff, and I knew plenty of guys that were very good at one style of things and were horrible at anything else. Like if you had to have somebody work with an old timer who wasn't going to take a lot of bumps and was just going to do a lot of crowd work, they'd be lost and they think the match would be terrible, even though it was maybe the best match on the card because this old timer knew how to get them over, So I think that we had an advantage with a lot of that stuff. I definitely do.
Yeah, well, true, because we had the foundation. You don't have to do crazy moves or big high spots to have a good solid match. I mean, the worst thing I think that happened was the star rating system in wrestling, because really, are you watching a movie? I mean, it's just like,
Absolutely.
It's like, really? Does it make
too, is that like I can remember seeing, guys that I think are really talented wrestlers, but maybe they were in a bad program. Look, sometimes you're in a great program that really shows you off, and then there's other times, this is who I'm with right now, and we're going to see how we can make some money out of it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how it is. It's not, but to rank somebody and to say, well, so and so isn't very good. One of the guys that I'm real close to out in the Midwest is a guy named Craig Kiesman. He does a gimmick called Niles Plonk, where he's the wine connoisseur, and it's legit because the guy he owns a winery. He is a wine connoisseur, so it's very natural for him to be this guy. Well, I have seen this guy work with. I mean, he was a talented guy who trained with old timer Sonny Myers. So Sonny Myers made Charlie look young, right? Sonny Myers was training guys when he was 89 years old, right? So very, very old school. Craig was one of the most talented guys I've been around, but for so long he was saddled working with these guys that were just awful. So like guys around the Midwest would think, oh yeah, Craig's good, but he's not great. And I would just look at him like, look, he is having matches with these guys that are potato sacks and broomsticks, and these guys are horrible. And the fact that he could get a C minus match out of them means that he's amazing. You know what I mean? He hasn't got the benefit of working with the 5 or 6 guys in this area that know what the hell they're doing. If he did, he'd tear the house down every night. But you don't see those other guys, you know. So to me, that's I never understood that, and it always made me think that's the way you can tell a guy that's in the business as opposed to a guy that just watches a lot of stuff that's in the business. Because you can tell when somebody's really good, they just happen to be working with a guy who, look, that's the best you're going to get out of that guy. That's it. So if you can do that, you're fucking great, you know?
Yeah. And the other thing too is I'm sorry, I have a cat that's by my feet that keeps clawing. I'm just like, I'm looking down all the time. It's just, yeah, it's hard to explain. But all right, one of the things that I saw Al Snow did this interview once about the wrestling fan can be toxic. In a sense, they'll still pay their money, they'll still come, but they think they know things because they're privy to some information versus working and doing this for a living, or working in the business and being in the ring and training, and going through all these steps. You know, they just watch it a lot. And he equated it to being a doctor. He goes, they don't have the experience, but they might have watched every medical drama, may have read all the medical journals, but that doesn't make them a doctor, you know. So I might have butchered that because I paraphrased it a little bit the way Al put it, but he's 100% right. And a lot of times people that really don't know the business think, well, this guy deserves a push or this guy deserves this. You don't know that. You know, you really don't. I mean, you don't know who deserves what or who can do what. What if they don't want that push? What if they're happy where they're at? You know, I think I saw one, they call it a shoot interview, but it was actually an interview with Ronnie Gardner. He said this. He said the reason why Flair had the belt all that time was because he was the only one willing to do the schedule. That's what he said. Right. He said that they were like, okay, you know, there's people that didn't want that. They didn't want to travel as much as them. They were happy where they were at. So there's a lot of things that go on that people don't understand or they don't even want to understand. And because it's the whole purpose of this is to make it look like an athletic contest. Right. That's the purpose. Make it believable, make it credible. And, you know, now you see, you know, I can't even imagine Charlie's reaction if I would do half the stuff these guys do on it. They put on a 30-second clip on Facebook or something like that, and they just get likes. Right. You didn't sell any more tickets.
Right.
You didn't.
Right.
So.
Yeah, for sure. I always like to, when I'd been in a position to kind of scout talent for different organizations and stuff, and I did that for a couple people, or like when I was in Harley's office and people would send stuff in, I would always have them like, I'd look at the match that they sent to me, but then I'd always search YouTube for the one they didn't send to me. You know, like I want to see you at your worst. I don't want to see your best. I mean, you could have got lucky, right? And had one good match, or maybe you're working with a guy who was really good. I want to see you work with the guy that should probably be selling popcorn and pull something out of that guy. Then I know you know what you're doing, you know. And then when I put you with somebody that's good, it'll be really good, you know, 9 times out of 10 anyway.
Yeah. And that's true. I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to think too. Some of the things that I see today, because I have a Harley race story I was going to tell you about.
Oh, yeah.
One of the belts that I have back here, it was the NWA Eastern States belt. He signed it. He presented it to me. He was there. It was in Carolina Beach, North Carolina. I won in the tournament finals, and he cut a promo. He handed me the belt and everything. I have a picture of it somewhere. And
that's awesome.
And they did a seminar with Harley. That we did matches and stuff, and who we wanted to be on the show. And because a guy I was in the ring with, I can't remember his name, but I was calling something and he didn't do it right. So I kind of took over and kind of put him where I needed him to be and everything. And everybody kind of saw that I was not happy. And Harley smiled when I did that. It's like he took over. He kind of smiled when I did.
Yeah, that sounds like him for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the other thing about Harley was I asked him one question throughout the seminar because he asked for questions. And I said, do you ever see the territories coming back? And he looked at me and said, no. That's all I said. said, no.
Yeah.
No, they're not. And this was 2013. This was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was cool to meet him. It was just something else. But it's a shame. Him and Charlie are no longer with us. And
Yeah.
just finding to pick his brain for a little bit. There was guys at that seminar that I just shook my head how bad they were. They just couldn't even do shoulder tackle spots. It was just like, it's something that's like second nature to me and you or the people that were trained. But it's just too many people, because I think we hit the nail on the head before. You tell me what you think of this. We had to really make an effort to get into the business and find the right place and get trained right.
Yeah.
You could just go anywhere, buy a pair of boots on the internet, and you're a wrestler.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's why.
I saw a tweet when I was leaving. I'm still kind of pretty connected with Kansas City. I spent so much time there that, I still pay attention to what's going on there. And I've only been back here in Denver for about 3 months anyway. So I still have some students that are looking for work there. Well, they were before the virus and stuff. Now that there's nothing really going on, but, so I still kind of pay attention to that. And one of the kids that would come and work out with me, he tweeted something about how Kansas City needs to have more than just one good wrestling organization. Now there's like 4 or 5 places you can work there. Some of them are better than others, but for one, don't insult the 4 other places you can work. And then he said, and we need to have a wrestling school in Kansas City. It's too much for me to drive 2 hours to train.
Whoa.
And I sent him a message and I said, and then I deleted it. I thought, if that's your level of commitment that you can't drive 2 hours, to do something you supposedly love, then I don't know what to tell you, and I routinely, thought about guys like you who, 2.5 hours each way, right? Every time you went to train, a couple times a week, Kenny, same thing. When I went to train, I moved my whole life all the way across the country to do it because it was important, I have students that in Kansas City that used to walk and take 2 buses to get to training, to be able to train. So like, please do not use the excuse that 2 hours is too much to do something,
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely think like, I mean, if that would have been me, this, and I only had to travel 2 hours to do something like that. I mean, hell, I'm old and I travel an hour and a half sometimes to go to a powerlifting gym or a strongman gym because they have the equipment that I need to do something that I love to do. It doesn't make any sense to me. It never has. And so,
go ahead. I'm sorry. I had a story for that to add to that.
There's always going to be guys that are like that, but it's too bad that you have to spend that they even get any attention at all, honestly,
There was a guy that was training up in Cleveland because I was there and I was helping training guys for a promotion up in Cleveland, and that place was closing up. And I said, well, hey, Jimmy Lee had a school in Mansfield, and I said, hey, I'll go to Mansfield. I know Jimmy, he'll do you right and everything else. And the first thing he said to me was, Mansfield, huh? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, that's far. It was a 1-hour drive from Cleveland, 70 miles, all interstate. And I just looked at him and I flat out told him, I said, you will never be a wrestler.
Yeah.
That's all I said to him. And he was shocked that I said that. I said, are you kidding me? And other people kind of went, yeah. I mean, you'll never be a wrestler.
Yeah,
you want to do it. 1 hour drive too much for you. Oh God. Oh yeah. How many hours did we put in on the road? How many miles?
Yeah.
It's just, I'm like, 1 hour is not going to do it. I said, hell, 1 hour is like a blink of an eye. I mean, I could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why a lot of people are surprised. Like, I could do long drives like nothing.
I laugh at a lot of the guys here in Denver. There's probably 4 or 5 different organizations, some smaller ones here, but they have local TV or they have some good talent. They're guys that look good. And, if you live in the Denver metro area, you could probably work for any number of these guys, and none of them are farther than an hour away. And I hear a lot of these guys in Denver complaining. I'm like, man, you have 5 places to work that are 50 minutes from your house. You're never going to get that anywhere else unless you move to the East Coast, So,
yeah.
So while you're learning, I think that's great. I think you're really in a good spot. Yeah, you're right. Maybe working the Colorado Indies isn't going to get you where you want. But listen, you're not going to get where you want for 2 or 3 years anyway. So you might as well work and learn how to work, in that time.
You
So
get the experience in front of people. That
yeah,
does so much. Just getting those matches in front of people. You
right.
just kind of you find your way. It kind of comes to you. It's like when you first learn how to drive. You now it's second nature to you. But when you're like 16 or 15 and a half, you got your permit, you're going through all the steps, and you're really careful and nervous, and then eventually it's like it becomes just a part of who you are. You don't even think half the time. You just go. And
Right.
it's amazing. Right. But I will say this, because my first WWF taping, I felt the same way. I saw like I walked in, there's Razor Ramon and Kevin Nash. I'm like looking up to them, say, "Hey guys, how you doing?" You know what I mean? I'm
Right,
sitting
right.
Paul and Kevin, Diesel. So,
Yeah.
I almost did have a mark out story too. I don't know if you know about this. It was because it was a Canton. It was my first WWF match, and I come into the locker room. I guess I was looking for Sparky Plug, Bob Holly. I was supposed to wrestle. Right. So I walked in the locker room. I was looking for him to let him know who I was and he could find me and we want to get the match together. Just because I was named on the board with them. I walk in and all of a sudden sitting on the bench right there was Bret the Hitman Hart. And I kind of looked, my eyes got real big, and then I always said, "How you doing?" And he kind of smiled. He said, "Hey." He kind of knew. Like I almost for a second there, I forgot where I was at. And I knew what I was supposed to do. He kind of laughed about it. But yeah, I've never ever talked to him ever since then. That was it. He probably wouldn't even remember who it was. But yeah, so just to add to that, did you have any other WWF stories like when you went through anything? Because I always have fun ones.
They were always really, really fun. It's funny. I always tell people that they treated me so well. I mean, I've probably done, I don't know, 30, 40 different matches for them, and there was a point where I was just doing a lot of dark matches and stuff. Anyway, I wasn't on TV, I'd work with guys like Joey Abs, and I was like the first match of the night and that kind of stuff. And that was really fun. It's surprisingly though, how everybody was very nice. And I had great memories of Howard Finkel, who just passed, not too long, a couple weeks ago. All the guys in the office, everybody there was always been very, very nice to me. And then since then, my relationship, I'm good friends with WWF referee John Cone, who is the guy who handles or was handling the enhancement talent and stuff. So he was a guy that, and hey, here's a good story for people listening. Don't ever be shitty to anybody in the business, because I can remember doing local Kansas Indies with John Cone, where he was a ref, and he used to wrestle as a guy named Aquaman. He wore a scuba suit and wore a scuba mask. He was Aquaman. And this is before he got serious about just being a ref. And he's, one of the best, probably the best ref I've ever been in the ring with. And then of course he went in to work for Harley. But he was a guy that a lot of people treated like shit and were really kind of shitty to, because he was just the lowly ref. And a couple of those guys at Harley's place, the guys, none of the guys that were local guys, but any of the guys that Harley brought in on a regular basis that were kind of our regulars, were not real nice to the guy. And I was nice to him because I like to think I'm nice to everybody, but he was also a friend of mine and I'd known him for a long time. And then, fast forward a couple years later, he's one of the, 4 or 5 most powerful guys in the WWF, right? He's handling the enhancement talent. He's helping guys get booked. He's setting things up. And, all of a sudden these guys are calling, "Hey, John, you remember me?" "Yeah, I do." Click. Never talks to him, And so it just kind of goes to show you, the wrestling business and the radio business are very similar in the fact that you never know who's going to be the guy that's going to step up and be very, very important in the near future. It happens all the time, man. Yeah. Or you never know what gimmick is going to catch fire, and then all of a sudden this guy is the guy you see everywhere. And 6 months ago nobody knew who he was, really. It's amazing. It's
just, trust me. Yep. You just be cool with everybody. Well, treat people the way you want yourself to be treated. That's the way I always thought about it. Just be cool and be respectful. And if there's a problem with somebody, you pull them aside and talk to them about it alone. Right. You don't yell at them and scream in front of everybody, but that's about it. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That, yeah, because I remember there was a guy I was not really close friends with, but I knew him. Mike Bucci, he was
Yeah,
Supernova. Yeah,
yeah.
he
He
had the
was the
same, he had the
he did the
same gig.
fitness too, right? He was the fitness trainer guy too, right? Simon
Yeah,
Dean. Yeah, right.
Simon
Okay.
Dean, Simon Dean. Yeah, that was his gimmick. Yeah, because he had the same type of position, and it was funny. He said something it's interesting. Like on Christmas now, I don't get anybody like calling me or messaging me Merry Christmas. When he had that job, everybody wished him a Merry Christmas.
Absolutely, right? That's funny. Yeah, that's and I think it's good that that a guy like that can recognize that. Like, okay, things are
Yeah,
going good for me. Everybody's going to call, but we'll see who's there when I don't have this job.
yeah, you don't have that power or that influence, and everybody's trying to get booked. Yep, it's
Absolutely.
always fun. So let me just go ahead because we know we talked about the WWF, we talked about the Harley and everything else. Is there something? I always like to ask this too. Is there something that you ever look back on that you wish you could change?
I struggle with that a little bit, sometimes. And short answer is probably no, because I'm pretty good with the decisions that I made at the time were what was right for me at the time.
Right.
There's plenty of times when I said, well, maybe if I would have left my wife and I would have just moved here, I could have got fast tracked to something. Maybe that would happen. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to leave my wife. I didn't want to leave my
Yeah.
whatever. So it didn't match up with other things in my life. I would say if there was one thing though, I would say this. When Gracia and I left Ohio, and I actually talked with Charlie about this before he died. We went to Texas because I felt like I wasn't ready to even try to get on WCW or to try to work in Atlanta or any of that stuff. I really didn't feel like I was ready for it. So I thought, well, Global is a step below that. So that would be my next step. It's like I considered the Indies in Ohio AA ball, Global was AAA, and then the WWF was Major Leagues, right? So turned out when we got there, Global was kind of on its very, very last legs. And, it's still a great experience for me. I loved living in Texas when we were there, but I probably should have, all things being equal, we probably should have just went to Atlanta. We should have moved to Atlanta instead of moving to Dallas. Kind of got on the ground floor with some of the WCW stuff, and maybe things would have been a little bit different. But all in all, I think things have worked out pretty well for me. I always could have probably been in better shape more consistently. There were times I was in fantastic shape, and then there was times that I was in passable shape. You know what I mean? Like I didn't look horrible, but I certainly didn't look my best all the time, and I should have.
Right.
So I constantly maybe those two things.
Yeah. Well, okay. Because I remember with Kid Collins, he said he was a single dad, so he was
Right.
very limited with what he could do. And I said, Mike, you're doing the right thing. You're being a father.
Absolutely.
Because with me, and I made this decision. Nobody made me do this. Once Christine got through her first trimester with our first child, I dropped the NWA national belt, and then I dropped the Carolina Showcase belt like a month later, and I went away for a little while. That was it. I did one more match for Cue Ball Carmichael, did a Buddy Landell Memorial Tournament show. That was in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I wrestled Tracy Smothers, put him over. And I think I did one tag match with Frank. It's pushing 2 years ago now. It's pushing 2 years because it was Zoltan was doing he had colon cancer. Lord Zoltan did, so we did a benefit for him. So Frank and I just dusted up our gear. We went to Pittsburgh and we did a match together. And and I keep myself physically active now. And I keep myself in shape because I'm avoiding the day. But I mean, I could. People say you can still work. You can do this. I said, yeah, I could, but maybe when they get older, I will. I'm going to be 47 next month, so I'm not really in a hurry. But it's the priority is the family. I just said I did that. I got it out of my system. Well, the other thing too is seeing guys doing spots with their genitals. Or it's the stupid stuff, and I'm like, that was unheard of when we got into the business. Women wrestling men in competitive style matches. I mean, the intergender stuff did happen before, but they did it to make it make sense. You know, they
Right.
didn't, it was different, you know, and when Andy Kaufman did it, it was a joke.
Right.
So,
Right. Just
so
designed to get heat and sell tickets, right? And this stuff isn't
I
selling
mean,
tickets.
yeah, now it's like, you know, and not to take away the talent from the female wrestlers at all. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying like you got to put out a credible product. So that there's a little bit disenchantment with that too. But like I said, that was my decision. So I mean, you're
Yeah.
still involved with it, which is great. So that's fantastic,
Um,
and you're happy. That's
yeah.
all that matters.
You know, I really like training. I like training guys a lot, and I think that's kind of where my, you know, where my focus for the future, I think, is going to be. And like I said, really, as far as working for anybody, um, I work for WLW for Harley's, you know, Harley's son Leland. I enjoy being there because I kind of have a little bit of an elder statesman, you know,
Yeah,
in a way, and in fact, also, especially now with Harley passing, there aren't as many folks around that kind of get what he's going for, what he really wanted to. Leland has that, but it's nice for him to have guys in the locker room like myself, or on special occasions, guys like Ace Steel, guys that are very familiar with this is the style of what Harley is trying to present and what people like. And I just found out, by the way, for all those folks that say like old school doesn't necessarily work, the ratings for the WLW television show in Columbia, Missouri are double what Ring of Honor are. So that I heard that and I thought this is fantastic because I mean I like Ring of Honor. I know plenty of folks that work there, but it was nice to see that, you know, in Missouri, Harley Race is still the king. You know, that style, what he's trying to present, that still works. And if I can be a part of that, and plus he has a great group of young guys there. One of the things that I do like about Harley is that they have still kept this. They do classes, so like, you know, they might start in January and they're going to let in 4 guys or 5 guys, and that's it. They're not training anybody who walks in the door anytime, you know. So those guys are there, and then they bust their ass. You know, you're working 4 or 5 nights a week training. You know, you're doing all. It's a commitment. You know, it's
yeah,
so I like that. I like that particular attitude, and it doesn't happen in a lot of places anymore. You know, so
that's
I'm glad to
cool.
be involved there. But as far as like, you know, it's going to take a lot for me to travel anywhere, anywhere else to do another spot show with some guy that I've already worked 100 times. You know, just probably not going to happen. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I'd
but
rather,
it's the truth. It's the
yeah,
truth. You deal with the reality. I mean, the other thing that scared me too was I know we talk about this like the deaths of wrestlers that have happened, guys,
absolutely, yeah,
and everything else, and it's like, well, you know, even though I have 2 young daughters, I waited till later in life to have my kids, and I want to be able to live to watch them grow up. I want to be able to walk them down the aisle. I want to be able to hold my grandkids. I hate it sounds crazy for me to say that, but I'm going to be 47 in June. In December, I'm going to be 20 years away from retirement. And
right,
people, wow, are you laughing about that? I said, well, wait a second. 20 years ago was the year 2000.
right,
20 years ago. Let's really. I mean, that it blew by. I
yeah,
mean, you know, I'm actually like putting together investment plans and how I'm going to do this and how I'm going to do that. How actually I am not going to be working at Walmart at 75. So
right.
I just said that's fun. So I just want to be
Things,
able to do it. What's that?
yeah, things change. Your perspective changes. Your priorities change. Yeah,
Well, what did it for me was when I turned 30 and I woke up and I'm like, okay, I'm 30 years old. I have nothing saved for my retirement. I really haven't had a career. I've had jobs. I bounced around from different things. It's time to actually have a career. And that's how I got the job at the insurance company. And that's what I said when I interviewed for them. I said, if you're giving me a job, I'm not going to take it. They're going to look like, what? And I said, I'm here for a career. And they like that. So I was like, give me the job, I guess, because I've been there. Well, I've
yeah,
been there for, it'll be 17 years. So it's November. Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
November. Yeah. No, oh yeah. And it's a good place to work and I don't complain. And plus I have the ability to work from home from this virus. So I have a home office and I can do that. So I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate. to have
For
that
sure.
too. So everything else. So okay, so we went over everything with how you do business and everything else. About ready to wrap this up with you, Derek. We can come back and visit anything you missed out or anything. I mean, you and I have known each other since 1993.
It's a long time, man. Yeah.
Yeah, a very long time. It's hard to believe because, and I'm going to ask you this before we wrap this up because I honestly wasn't sure. Like when I first came in and I introduced myself to everybody and wanted to get into the ring and train, because there's times when guys come in, you can tell if they're going to do something in this business or not.
Yeah.
Do you remember because you were watching me try out? Do you remember the thought going through your mind when you guys saw me?
Um, yeah, I do, and I kind of remember the same thing with Kenny as well. I kind of feel a closeness with you and Kenny that I don't feel with a couple of the other guys, just because we all started very, very like the same time. A couple months difference is no difference to me. We're the same. We were there at the same time. So I remember one thing with Kenny. I thought, oh my God, this guy is an Adonis. Like this dude has an amazing build.
He still looks great. He looks
And he looks
amazing.
better now than he did 30 years ago. It's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there was that, and then, but I remember with you, I thought this guy has a lot of heart. So I thought, you definitely were a guy I thought right away was going to put in the time, because I had already even been there just a couple months. I had already seen guys that I would see maybe 1 week and then I wouldn't see him for another 3 weeks. There were guys like, Bill Baker. There were guys like Rod, who I would see every so often. I would see some of these other dudes kind of fade in and out. And I thought, this guy's he's going to put in the effort, whether or not it meant that I naively thought everybody that was there and worked hard was going to be a big star someday, which there's probably a little more to it than that. But I definitely thought that of you and me and Kenny, I thought were guys that were going to be there for a long time.
Well, I was going to say this though. This is the truth because nobody smartened me up to this until I was there for a few months before. I was there about 6 or 8 weeks. That ring was so hard. I thought all the rings were that hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And Charlie told me that. Oh, no. This is a training ring. I purposely do it this way. And the ropes were sagging.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like he says, if you can wrestle, you can bump in here and you can work in this ring, work anywhere. That's what he said. So that's the one thing I remember. And I was like, oh, so I'm going to actually be able, because I was times after a 2.5 hour drive and bumping in that ring, I couldn't even get out of my car.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
I'm 19. I'm going, Jesus.
I can imagine just by the time you get back to Brooklyn, you're like, oh man, this hurts. I can't even get out of this car. Yeah.
Brooklyn, Ohio. Yeah, that's rough. I tell people they see Brooklyn, New York. I'm like, no, Brooklyn, Ohio.
Oh man, you're totally right about the ring though. That's just another thing though that is kind of you look at it now and it was a blessing, because I can't tell you how many places I've worked that had shitty rings or the top rope broke, so we have to finish the match without it. Okay, sure enough, man, that's fine. It's no problem. Or as long as the mat wasn't lumpy and I didn't trip when I was running it, I could care less how hard it was. You know what I mean? I'll figure that out myself.
Yeah, if you weren't used to it. Yeah, if you weren't used to it, it was brutal. Yeah, if you weren't used to it. But that was the fun part of it. That toughened you up. It's his way of weeding guys out. Another thing about Charlie too, that how modest he was and how humble he was. He wrestled Lou Thesz.
Yeah.
He wrestled Antonio Inoki, and he hit Bob Backlund in the Madison Square Garden. He wrestled Flair. I mean, he wrestled all those guys. So it's you didn't know that until somebody else told me, and I didn't know he did a tour. He was drafted. He did a tour in Vietnam. He was a Vietnam War veteran. I never knew that until he died, and I read his obituary. That's how I found out, and I was like, oh, it's crazy.
It's funny. He's probably one of the most humble and modest people I've ever met. Yeah, because you're exactly right. If you didn't ask him specifically, or somebody else didn't tell you, he didn't tell you. And here's a guy that's been all over the world. Every person that I ever talked to really, really liked him. Didn't just say, oh, he's a nice guy. Like they really liked him, and but to him, he'd never say that, you know.
Yeah. Well, and the thing he said, the thing, he kind of was just telling me, his big thing to me was don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. Keep plugging away. It'll pay off. That was his thing. Because he got he's talked about times when he was younger and he got frustrated with the business. And,
Well, we're talking about things that he said that stuck with you. One of the things that I tell people now, and it really has been something that has served me my whole life, not just with wrestling, but with everything, is that he said, look, if you got talent, that's the one thing they can't take away from you. Yeah. So, you can be in a spot where maybe you're not the top guy, but damned if you're not very, very good, they're going to find a spot for you. And that has been true for me in radio. It's been true for me in wrestling. Like, look, just put your head down, go to work, get good at what you're supposed to get good at, and it's all going to work out. And for the most part, I would say it has for me. That's been maybe one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. And I try to tell every student that if you put in the time, you work, and you get good, nobody can take that from you. Nobody can say, I hate that guy, but fuck, he's a good wrestler, or whatever, you know what I mean? They can't ever take that from you. So.
Right. That's true. Another thing, I remember I came to because there was like a radio show up in Cleveland, a syndicated radio show about wrestling and everything else. Mm-hmm. And are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, they had Gordon Solie on a radio show that I was listening to when I first started training. And Gordon Solie said 95% of the guys that are trying to train and become wrestlers don't make it. That's what he said. And I asked Charlie about that. And Charlie's like, he kind of looked at me and he goes, well, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to accomplish? He told me to kind of make a list of what I wanted to do. And I pretty much did it, except for I didn't get to go to Japan. That's the only thing I didn't get to do. But everything else I did. So it was just like, so I think that's pretty darn good. I mean, I almost went to Japan, but it didn't happen. But hey, I could, if I really busted the phones and really tried hard enough, I could have gotten booked in Japan.
Sure, man.
But I just didn't, didn't go for it at the time. But it's kind of how he kind of gave me perspective. It's like, yeah, this is great, you're doing this, but really, what's important to you? Do you really do you have to headline WrestleMania to make it, or do you,
right? Yeah,
do you accomplish what you want to accomplish? And I look back now, man, it's been 27 years. 27 years. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
And just the stuff that you've done, the stuff that I've done, the stuff that Kenny's done, it's amazing. It's just blows my mind because we all kind of went our own ways, but we still accomplished a lot. We still have a tie together. I still consider Kenny a brother. I consider you a brother. So it's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're going to do this again sometime. But before, I mean, we're about an hour, 18 minutes into this.
Okay.
I always like to end this. Do you have anything that you want to talk about? Anything you want to plug before we go? Before I ask you one final question.
Right now I'm working on possibly getting another radio show, but I'm a little bit off from that. Until then, I guess the only thing that I would plug is if you're looking for a different wrestling show to watch, maybe kind of an old school attitude, look up WLW, which is World League Wrestling. That's Harley Race's organization. That's the only thing really that I have to plug right now. And maybe the next time I'm on, I'll have something else to talk about.
Sure. And let me ask you, did Jim Cornette work for them or do work with them? Is that the same WLW?
He is not currently doing that, but he worked with Major League Wrestling, which might be what we're talking about for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was
if you're looking for another show, that's a good show to watch too, Major League Wrestling. There's some really talented guys there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. So, okay. So is there any piece of advice you want to leave with anybody at this point in time?
I would say, work hard, keep your mouth shut. Sometimes might be the best advice I ever got, Yeah,
you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You listen twice.
That's right. Any other cool coach cliches that I can think of, you should follow those because they really do work.
Yeah. Dad, show up, do your work. All right. Well, hey, this was the Stew Pot episode 9. Anybody, please like and share this. Subscribe. I greatly appreciate anybody taking the time to watch this. This is with Derek Stone. This was the Stew Pot episode 9. Hey, Derek, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have you on again. It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Hey, Mike, me too, man. I love you, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Love you too.
Take care, bud.